On today's Prophecy in the News, we're going to discuss a number of things going on around the world. There's a lot of natural disasters, possibility of war in the Middle East. We're going to start with the California wildfires. Gary Stearman has written an article, a cover story for our August magazine. It's called, In California, Echoes of Sodom and Gomorrah. Gary, tell us about it.
Well, JR, looking at events in America right now, there's a little bit of consternation. People are worried about everything from the economy to global warming. They're worried about various and sundry kinds of social instabilities, including a lot of the legislation that's recently taken place. And they're asking the question, because of our flagging morality, has judgment fallen upon America? Well, we sort of brought this story to a specific series of events that have taken place in California. And I'm sure that most of you are familiar with the California fires that have swept literally from San Diego northward through the area of Fresno, San Francisco, and points north. JR, literally thousands of fires have hit California. Is this an act of God?
We want to tell you that we know there's a lot of wonderful Christian people in California, and a lot of good churches, and we are praying for them, and I know that they're suffering out there. On the other hand, the California Supreme Court recently struck down a law that defined marriage as a union between a man and a woman, saying that it was unconstitutional, and all of the homosexuals in California rejoiced. And while they were rejoicing, enjoying, well, it was from May 15th through June, and while they were having their big old time, suddenly between June the 20th and the 27th, within 7 days there were over 1,700 fires started by lightning.
Yes.
Which in every traditional sense of the word is called acts of God.
That's what the insurance companies would say. They would say it's an act of God. JR, let's review a couple of key events in California going back to 2007. On October 13th, 2007, Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger signed legislation banning the terms, quote, mom and dad, as well as, quote, husband and wife from common use in the public schools in California. And by the way, that gubernatorial approval started a wave of legislation that continues to this day.
Now, that was on the 13th of August.
Yes.
What happened 10 days later on the 23rd?
On the 23rd, actually of October 2007, JR, a series of fires started in Southern California, down around San Diego. We all remember the Santa Ana winds. People who lived in San Diego, JR, were forced to stay in their houses. They couldn't go to the store. It was too smoky outside. The fires were literally unstoppable. And they came right on the heels of that legislation. Well, let's fast forward now to the recent past. In 2008, we have this incredible spread of fires following on the heels of a decision by the California Supreme Court. Sacramento, California, May 15th, 2008. A ruling was delivered today, that's May 15th, 2008, by the California Supreme Court concerning Proposition 22, which defined marriage as the union between a man and a woman. It was deemed to be unconstitutional in a 4-3 decision. Writing for the majority, Chief Justice Ronald M. George said, in light of the conclusions we reached concerning the constitutional questions brought to us for resolution, we determined that the language of Section 300 limiting the designation of marriage to a union between a man and a woman is unconstitutional and must be stricken from the statute. And guess what, JR? Within days, 1,700 fires were started by lightning.
Yeah.
This time farther north, beginning around Los Angeles and traversing the entire state, literally to the northern border of California. And by the time we're making this broadcast, we're approaching 2,000 separate fires.
Yeah, 1,781 fires in 7 days. That's incredible.
Now,
and they were all started by lightning.
Now, we have to ask the question, is all this coincidence? We have two dates. We have October 13th, 2007. Legislation was signed specifically striking down traditional biblical morality, and in the days following, Southern California forest fires. We have the May 15th, 2008 banning of Proposition 22 and allowing a marriage between a man and a woman, and literally within days, 1,710 forest fires within 1 week caused by lightning. Is it coincidence, J.R.?
You know, going back to Genesis chapter 18, the Lord said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which is come unto me, and if not, I will know. The Lord had to see it for himself. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He couldn't believe the cries that were coming up of the sins of these people. He said, I got to see this for myself. Is this really going on? If it is, I'll know it. If it's not, I've got to see for myself. And so he sent these guys down, these angels down to look for themselves. And sure enough, the people were such sodomizers, homosexuals, that God had to destroy the place with a fire.
And this raised a great question in Abraham at the time, because as soon as Abraham discovered that this judgment was coming, he said, as recorded in Genesis 18:23, Abraham drew near and said, wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked? This is a huge moral question. J.R. started a moment ago by saying there are some of the finest churches in the United States located in California. The righteous are out there, J.R. Faithful men and women, radio broadcasts, TV programs, the gospel is going forth in California. That question that Abraham asked rings out again today.
But let's face it, if the politicians and the leaders of the people are wicked, it will bring on God's judgment upon their land.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, we have here the angel saying to Lot, haste thee, escape thither, for I cannot do anything till thou be come thither.
Yeah.
So the Lord is protecting his people, even in the midst of his judgment upon the ungodly.
Are you saying that Lot may be a type of the rapture of the church, taking the people out before judgment?
Well, no, that would be a nice way to look at it, wouldn't it?
It would be.
I tell you what, this is so important that we understand God's judgment. You see, if God was willing to judge Sodom and Gomorrah, don't think that he's changed his opinion today. Isn't that right?
That's right. We have to say it, as much as it pains us, we don't want to see God's judgment on America. On the other hand, if God held this opinion so many thousand years ago concerning Sodom and Gomorrah, God's morality, his ethics are unchanging. I'm sure he's of the same opinion today.
Yes, well, look at all the floods in the upper Mississippi and Missouri River valleys.
Oh, yes.
And Iowa and all of those cities that have been so inundated. It's worse than Katrina, the Katrina disaster in New Orleans. We have had so many people displaced. It's a sad thing. And yet, what are we doing to Israel? Look at what we're doing. Condoleezza Rice goes over there and she gets on to them saying that we will never accept the Jewish settlements east of Jerusalem. And we're going to turn it over to the Palestinians. And they're pushing for a Palestinian state, cramming it down the throats of God's chosen people in God's promised land. It's like they're spitting in the eye of God. How can God let America get away with that?
Now, the Associated Press, it's a liberal news outlet. There's no doubt about it. It's very secular. And yet on Saturday, June 21st, J.R., they came out with this article entitled, Everything is Seemingly Spinning Out of Control. And they ask the question, basically why. They say Midwestern levees are bursting, polar bears are adrift, gas prices are skyrocketing, home values are abysmal, airfares, college tuition, health care border on the unaffordable, wars without end rage in Iraq, Afghanistan, and against terrorism. And they go on and on. I could go on for quite a while. As you can see, I've got 2 pages here.
Yeah.
That was the general tenor of the article by the Associated Press. They're saying, what's wrong?
Yeah. Coming out of the 20th century, World War I, World War II, the Cold War, and then Russia falls. And you would think utopia had arrived.
Oh, yes.
Things are falling apart. God's judgment is upon this wicked world. Instead of things getting better, people repenting, people being glad of God's blessings upon us, Russia no longer the Soviet menace that it once was. It's all coming around again, folks. Now let me tell you.